Welcome back to The Observing Eye. This is Pirate Radio for the Mind, and this week we are considering the idea of the philosopher's cage. But before I continue, I just have a tiny bit of housekeeping that I need to address. Last week we missed an episode, and I'm going to be honest, I have been crazy busy with a load of renovation work going on in the house. So, the bed is downstairs, everything's a mess, it's complete chaos. So I'm going to do my best to get one out next week as well, but over the next 2-3 weeks, just bear with me a little bit because we have a bit of madness in the homestead going on. Just giving you all an update, let you know where we are. We haven't gone away. I'm sure some of you are going, fucking he's still here. But no, I'm here. We're going to keep doing this. Just may not be quite as consistent over the next couple of weeks as I've previously tried to be. Okay, let's get into this idea of the philosopher's cage. I'm going to give you a metaphor to start with. I want you to imagine, there's lots of mirror talk in this episode, so bear with me a bit. You are standing in front of a mirror. This is not your bathroom mirror. There's no toothpaste flecks and, all of that shit that gets on it. This is an ancient mirror, black glass, maybe obsidian. And it doesn't reflect your face. It reflects back whoever happens to own you, whoever signs the checks, whoever feeds you or starves you, whoever writes the rules and punishes the sins. That's philosophy. Not some pure hunt for capital T truth. Philosophy is the world's longest running costume drama, dressing up power as wisdom, painting empire as reason, polishing chains until they look remarkably like jewelry. See, philosophy, or the idea in this episode, is that philosophy is a shifting mirror of power. That is the premise here. Every time that you think philosophers are sitting alone, wistfully gazing at the sky under olive trees, what they are actually doing is building these big reflective ideologies. Now, these mirrors reflect the people on top. City-states, emperors, popes, kings, bankers, presidents, CEOs, general wankers. Philosophy, did I say that? Philosophy never floats free. It is chained, always, to whoever can pay its bill or sharpen its axe. Think about Socrates, wandering around Athens just annoying everyone with questions about virtue and justice. Now, they killed Socrates, and they said it was because he corrupted the youth, but the truth is that he wouldn't stop showing the city its ugly reflection. And Plato, he takes Socrates' corpse and he builds the Republic with it, a fantasy city where philosophers run everything. No messy democracy, no rabble with their greasy little hands all over the levers of power. Philosophy here is a blueprint for a ruling class that thinks it's smarter, better, and more justified. Move forward a few centuries. See, I'm criticizing philosophy this episode in a way. Christianity muscles in, dons its cassock, and philosophy becomes theology's indentured servant. Augustine tells you that you're born filthy, welcome to Catholicism, filthy, broken, and damned unless you obey the church. The guilt that keeps you awake at night, that is not an accident. Aquinas later takes Aristotle and straps him onto the cross like Frankenstein wiring together a monster. Suddenly, the divine order of heaven looks exactly like the feudal order of kings and peasants. Is that a coincidence? I think not. Philosophy has always worked this way. The Enlightenment promised liberation, reason, science, individual rights, but behind the shiny new Labour-esque slogans, it was writing the user manual for capitalism and empire. Rationality as a weapon, not a gift. A mirror that reflected white, landowning men in wigs while whole continents were carved up and sold. Freedom for some, chains for everyone else. You start to see the pattern here. Every time philosophy claims it's universal, eternal, and pure, you should check who's looking into that mirror. Whose reflection is being protected, whose crimes are being excused. Because philosophy, for all its brilliance, has always been a performance of power. From the Stoics telling emperors how to endure, to Marx calling the whole system a scam, to Foucault showing how even prisons and schools are built to control you. Every philosopher has caught the glint of power and tried to name it. Now that is where we are headed in this episode. A walk through the gallery of cracked mirrors. Ancient Greece, the church, the Enlightenment, revolution, modernity. Each act is another trick of the light, another way power has dressed itself up as reason morality, and progress. By the end, I'm hoping you'll wonder if your own beliefs, the ones that you call yours in quotation marks, are really just another reflection handed down, another shiny mask covering someone else's control. You ready to go? Let's do it. 835. We're going to start in Athens, around about 400 BC. Now, not the Disney version of Athens, not this shining white marble everywhere. The real Athens stinks of sweat and sewage, fish guts in the streets, slaves hauling amphorae, citizens drunk on wine mixed with water that tastes like metal. And in the middle of this noise, you've got Socrates, barefoot, ugly as sin, stopping people in the marketplace. Imagine you're late for work, you've got figs in one hand and an overdue tax bill in the other, and this maniac with crazy eyes grabs your arm and says, "But what is justice?" Socrates was like a bit of a sort of fairground mirror. You hold him up and suddenly your face looks all twisted. He showed Athenians what they didn't want to see, that their democracy was fragile, their definitions were garbage, their politicians were con men selling shadows as truth. Has anything changed? That is why they killed him. They claimed he corrupted the youth, but what that really means is he made them look too closely at the reflection of themselves. Plato, Socrates' starry-eyed disciple, took this idea and decided it's too dangerous to let everyone look at it, so he invents a new one. His republic isn't just a thought experiment. It's an authoritarian dream disguised as philosophy. He imagines a city where everyone's slotted into castes, ruled by philosopher kings. Soldiers keep order, workers toil, and the thinkers, that's Plato's people, decide what is real. Truth isn't up for grabs anymore. It belongs to the ruling class, polished into perfection and handed down like some holy relic. Plato says this is justice, but if you squint, it looks a lot like tyranny with slightly better branding. Then along comes Aristotle. Now, if Plato built these skyborn utopias, Aristotle digs down into that dirt, and we've talked about Aristotle. He was a big lover of categorization, plants, animals, emotions, governments. He dissects reality into neat boxes, little filing cabinets for existence. Aristotle's mirror reflects the empire to come. His logic, his biology, his ethics, they are blueprints for managing chaos, organizing subjects, and justifying hierarchies. He said some people were natural slaves. Now think about that for a second. Philosophy as instruction manual for oppression, cosplaying as science. The mirror here doesn't just reflect power, it helps design the whole fucking thing. Now we're going to fast forward a couple of centuries. Greece loses its swagger, Rome swallows it whole. The toga replaces the tunic, and philosophy adapts like a parasite finding a new host. Roman elites adopt Stoicism as their moral armor. Picture Seneca sipping imported wine in a marble villa while writing about the virtue of indifference. He tells you that suffering is an illusion, that external things don't matter, that wisdom means accepting fate. That's really easy to say when you're rich, when your villa has mosaics of dolphins on the floor. Harder when you're a slave with a whip scarf across your back and, you've got some offcuts from carpet right in your living room. And yet Stoicism flips too. Epictetus, born a slave, takes those same ideas and makes them into a survival strategy. His philosophy isn't about polishing the emperor's halo, it's about keeping your inner freedom when everything else is chained. Power still frames the mirror, but now the reflection can be twisted. You can't control your body, but you can control your mind. That's resistance disguised as obedience. Rome loved philosophy for the same reason that Athens tolerated Socrates until they didn't. It soothed the powerful, it kept the masses manageable. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and stoic, wrote meditations while commanding legions and crushing rebellions. Imagine being one of those soldiers freezing in the mud on the frontier, Visigoths and Vandals screaming at you across the hillside, while your emperor just casually writes about serenity. Philosophy here is the anesthetic to power. It makes conquest feel like destiny, tyranny feel like order. I read the meditations, and there's a particular caption in it that kind of made me laugh. And it's where Marcus Aurelius is complaining about wine. And he's like going, "Oh, I have this wine, it is just fermented grapes. What is the meaning of wine?" And then you're like, you've got like the best wine in all of Rome, like one of the biggest empires in ancient history. I was like, this is just wine. What is wine? What does wine matter? Does it even exist? Am I even real? That's a luxury. It's an indulgence, isn't it? It's a real fucking indulgence to be in that place. Good book, though. Like, recommend giving it a read. Now, there is a crack running through this whole Greek to Rome transition. Philosophy is never just one thing. It is always contested. The same stoicism that teaches emperors how to endure also teaches slaves how to survive. The same Platonic idealism that builds utopias can also arm religious dogma. The mirror is never stable. It keeps flipping, catching different faces depending on who's holding it. Now that is the birth of our philosophical mirror. It doesn't start as some pure search for truth. It is both a weapon and a shield. Socrates made the powerful squirm. Plato drafted a manual for them. Aristotle sorted people into categories that justified their chains. Rome took it all and made it a coping mechanism for emperors and slaves alike. From the very beginning, thought bends to whomever controls the stage. So when we say philosophy is the mirror of power, this is ground zero. Philosophy didn't just reflect politics, it was politics. Athens, Rome, democracy, empire, slavery, freedom, it all shimmered in those mirrors. And the reflection was always distorted, always serving someone's agenda. The dirty secret is, it still is. By the end of the Roman era, philosophy had already proved its trick. It could make oppression look like wisdom, conquest look like virtue, slavery look like fate. It could soothe emperors, it could console the broken. The mirror was forged, and it wasn't going anywhere. The lights go out in Europe. Rome collapses. The aqueducts rot. Someone goes and breaks the dicks off all those marble statues that are everywhere. Civilization isn't gone, but it is different now. And when it comes back into the light, the church is underneath, grinning, holding the keys. Philosophy doesn't vanish into the rubble. It gets baptized and put to work. From the ashes of empire rises a new empire, one you can't see. Not armies, not walls, not fortresses. This empire is made of guilt, fear, and invisible judgment. Enter Augustine, 4th century bishop, ex-playboy, professional sinner turned moral accountant. His confessions read like a therapy session with a hangover. The sex, the greed, the hunger, and then the sudden revelation that all of it is filth compared to God. Augustine takes Plato's idealism, the eternal forms, the world of perfection beyond the senses, and slaps a crucifix on it. He says the city of God is up there, shining, untouchable. Down here in the city of man, we're crawling through mud. You're born stained, guilty, and broken. You don't just commit sins, you are sin. That is the new reflection. And what's guilt if not the perfect leash? Augustine hands power its greatest invention, the ability to own not just your body, not just your labor, but your soul. If Plato gave rulers the blueprint for hierarchy, Augustine gave beasts, some sort of Freudian slip there. Augustine gave the beasts the blueprint for control. The mirror no longer reflects kings and citizens, it reflects your dirty conscience, dirty, warped until you'll kneel to anyone who claims they can wash you clean. By the time Aquinas comes along in the 13th century, the church isn't satisfied with fear alone. It wants a rational fortress. So Aquinas drags Aristotle back from the grave. All those categories, all that logic, dusted off and wired into theology. If Aristotle once justified slavery by calling some people natural slaves, Aquinas justifies the church's dominance by saying natural reason points to God's truth. Faith and reason welded together like a crown hammered onto a skull. And here is the real trick. The hierarchy of heaven, the angels, the archangels, God at the top of the tree, that is mirrored in the feudal hierarchy of earth. Kings rule by divine right, lords rule peasants by God's plan. Priests stand in the middle, interpreters of both worlds. The mirror doesn't just reflect reality, it manufactures it. Theology becomes the architecture of society. Your birth status, your suffering, your hunger, all of it is holy because the mirror says so. Look at the monasteries. knowledge locked away behind stone walls, written by candlelight in Latin that no normal person could read. Philosophy survives, but only in the hands of the elite, only as long as it kneels to theology. Heresy isn't just disagreement, it's treason against reality. And the punishment? Fire, rope, the stake. Try to polish the mirror the wrong way and you're ash. But there's always a crack. Always. The medieval period wasn't one seamless chain. There were underground currents, quiet heresies, mystics who saw visions, peasants who muttered that maybe God didn't love the lords more than them. The Catars in southern France who believed the material world was corrupt got exterminated in crusades. The mirror of power doesn't tolerate rival reflections. Still, even the heretics are part of the story, because every time the church smashed a rival philosophy, it polished its own mirror brighter. Every time it silenced someone, it made obedience look like truth. Augustine's guilt, Aquinas' reason, they worked not because they were right, but because they were useful. Useful for keeping the machinery humming. Peasants in the fields, knights at war, kings in palaces, priests counting their coffers. And philosophy? It became theology's ventriloquist dummy. Ask about justice, the church puts its hand up the dummy's arse and says, God's will. Ask about truth and the dummy says, Scripture. Ask about the meaning of life and the dummy points at the cross. The questions never go away. I should probably stop voice acting the dummy. They'll just get redirected, bent and domesticated. The mirror reflects only when it's allowed to reflect. I don't know. I'm not taking this very seriously today. I apologize. I have a script, but I'm going off it a fair amount. Am I making sense? Who knows? Am I even real? This was philosophy in chains. Not dead, not gone, just shackled to the altar, polishing the authority of priests and kings. In the ancient world, philosophy at least wrestled openly with politics, with nature, with logic. In the Middle Ages, it became the velvet glove covering the church's iron fist. Augustine taught you to hate yourself. Aquinas taught you to rationalize that hate. And in between them stretched 1,000 years where philosophy's only role was to bow its head and whisper Amen. But here is the irony. By chaining philosophy, the church kept it alive. By forcing it to serve theology, they preserved Aristotle and Plato, kept their manuscripts hidden in libraries, waiting for a time when the lock would snap open. Power never knows when it's carrying its own destruction in its pocket. That's the Middle Ages. Philosophy stripped, collared and marched through the streets like a dog on a leash. The mirror is held up high, but it only reflects the glory of God and the authority of his earthly agents. And yet, somewhere in that reflection, tiny cracks spread. Because mirrors don't stay whole forever. The Middle Ages end the way a nightmare does. You wake up sweating, gasping, screaming into the darkness, carrying fragments of that dream into the daylight. That's how I wake up every morning. Europe staggers out of its 1,000-year sleep, eyes blinking against new light, and declares itself reborn. Renaissance, they call it, rebirth. Knowledge dug out of monasteries, art painted in colours too vivid for saints alone, trade routes spilling gold and gunpowder into every port. And philosophy, after centuries kneeling at the altar, stands up, stretches, and tells the world it's free. But here is the thing. Freedom is never free. Philosophy breaks its chains only to put on a new kind of collar. Not the crucifix this time, but reason, rationality. The Enlightenment is a bonfire of superstition. Philosophers sell it as liberation, but the reflection it shows is narrow. A man in a powdered wig, landed, property-owning, the new chosen people illuminated by reason's glow, while everyone else remains in the shadows. Take René Descartes. Picture him alone in a cold room, doubting everything, his senses, the world, even his own body, until he lands on that famous thought, I think, therefore I am. A rallying cry for rational autonomy. But what kind of mirror is that? The body reduced to suspicion, the world outside reduced to uncertainty. Thought alone becomes the anchor of existence. This isn't just philosophy, this is a reflection of a new power structure, one where the mind dominates the body, where reason dominates nature, where control is the highest virtue. Then there's Thomas Hobbes, and I don't think I've done an episode on Thomas Hobbes, so maybe that one's on the cards. He looks at humanity and he sees beasts clawing at each other. Life without order, he says, is nasty, brutish, and short. His solution? The Leviathan, a state so powerful it swallows individual freedom whole. Better to be controlled than to be torn apart. His philosophy reflects the anxiety of a Europe scarred by civil wars and revolutions. Power demands obedience, and Hobbes polishes the mirror until fear looks like safety. John Locke, more optimistic, writes about natural rights, life, liberty, property. He insists government should protect individuals, not devour them. Sounds liberating, but look closer. Property becomes the foundation of liberty. And who has property in the 17th century? Landowners, colonizers, slave traders. Locke's mirror reflects their interest perfectly. Freedom, yes, but only if you have power. For everyone else, freedom is theoretical, a promise written in invisible ink. And then Rousseau with his romantic fever screaming that man is born free but everywhere in chains. He blames society for corrupting pure human nature. His philosophy fuels revolutions, inspires mobs, sets fire to thrones. But even Rousseau's freedom is selective, often blind to women, blind to colonized people, blind to anyone outside the European stage. The mirror reflects liberty, equality, fraternity, but only for the right faces. Now here is the dirty secret of the Enlightenment. Reason becomes a cage. It doesn't look like one because the bars are made of light, progress, science, and logic. Who could argue with those? But the reflection is rigged. Reason justifies colonial conquest, civilizing the savages. Reason justifies capitalism, rational markets, efficient labor. Reason justifies patriarchy, women as irrational, emotional, and secondary. Philosophy polishes the mirror and suddenly exploitation looks enlightened, slavery looks scientific, and empire looks inevitable. Think about Immanuel Kant. We've certainly done an episode on him. Perched in Königsberg, obsessed with duty, morality, and universality. He builds intricate systems of reason like a master watchmaker. His categorical imperative, act only according to that maxim you can will as universal law. Yeah, exactly. It sounds noble and abstract and universal and doesn't really make a lot of sense, but at the same time, it doesn't make a lot of sense to the standard person who doesn't philosophy. I don't philosophy, who doesn't study philosophy. But at the same time, Kant writes racist essays ranking human beings in hierarchies, justifying European superiority. His mirror reflects both universality and exclusion. It's the Enlightenment in miniature, reason as liberation for some, justification for dominance of others. Voltaire, we are going through them today, Voltaire mocks superstition, skewers kings, champions free thought, but he invests in colonial enterprises that depend on slavery. David Hume dismantles causality, questions the self, laughs at certainty, but he also writes that black people are naturally inferior. Philosophy in the Enlightenment doesn't escape power, it just switches allegiances. From God to reason, from heaven to progress, the mirror still belongs to the ruling class. This is the cage of reason. The Enlightenment taught us to worship logic the way the Middle Ages taught us to worship God. You want to see the strings? Reason says, here they are, transparent, objective, and undeniable, but the strings still pull you. The puppet still dances. Power just looks more rational now, more scientific, more modern. Factories rise, smoke chokes the sky, and philosophy calls it progress. Colonies are carved up, entire continents enslaved, and philosophy calls it civilization. Women chained to domestic roles, and philosophy calls it natural order. The Enlightenment is a hall of mirrors where freedom reflects as control, progress reflects as oppression, and reason reflects as domination. But here is where the cracks start. The Enlightenment plants seeds it cannot contain. When you tell people they have rights, eventually they'll believe you, even the ones you didn't mean to include. Revolutions break out. America declares independence. France guillotines its kings. Haiti, led by enslaved people, rises against empire. The mirror of reason reflects power, but the reflection starts slipping, showing faces the philosophers never intended. That's the paradox. Philosophy in the Enlightenment both serves power and undermines it. Hobbes builds leviathans. Locke justifies property and empire. Kant enshrines universal law while ranking races. And yet Rousseau whispers freedom. Hume whispers skepticism. Voltaire whispers rebellion. The mirror reflects, but it also distorts, and once people see their own faces in it, they start to demand more. The Enlightenment promised light, but every light casts shadows. In those shadows, you can already see the 19th century stirring. Hegel, who we covered in our last episode, with his grand history, Marx sharpening his critique, Nietzsche mocking truth itself. The cage of reason won't hold forever. But for now, the Enlightenment stands as proof. Philosophy doesn't escape power. It never did. It just builds a prettier cage, polishes a brighter mirror, makes the chains look more rational. And people cheer, thinking they're free, while the lock clicks shut. Now we move into the 19th century. Crystal chandeliers dripping light, velvet curtains heavy enough to muffle screams, powdered wigs bobbing as dancers whirl, sipping champagne paid for with colonial plunder. The Enlightenment threw this party, reason provided the music. Liberty and progress were painted on the invitations, and then someone kicks the door in, a mob swarms in, the guillotine waits outside like an impatient lover, or a stalker, heads roll, the mirror of power cracks. Welcome to the 19th century, where philosophy stops pretending to be polite. No more powdered wigs, no more universal reason floating above the world like a halo. Now it's about history, struggle, rebellion, and despair. The mirror doesn't show balance or symmetry anymore, it shows fractures, splinters, and exposes its jagged edges. Philosophers stop polishing it and start smashing it against the floor to see what spills out. Hegel is the first to pick up the shards. He looks at the French Revolution, the blood in the streets, the heads in the baskets, and decides it wasn't chaos, it was history itself waking up. His philosophy turns the whole world into a stage play, every act driven by conflict, every scene moving toward freedom. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, a dialectic, he calls it, the world spirit unfolding, inevitable, unstoppable. Empires rise, empires fall, but it all adds up to progress. Hegel's mirror reflects power as destiny. Kings topple, revolutions explode, and he says it's all part of the script. Even Napoleon, galloping across Europe with armies and cannons, becomes just another actor in the world spirit's drama. Hegel baptizes power with inevitability, polishes tyranny until it looks like a stepping stone to freedom. He makes history itself into the new god and philosophy into its priesthood. But then Karl Marx kicks the door in again. He looks at Hegel's grand opera and spits on it. History isn't some mystical spirit, it's class struggle. It's blood and sweat and stolen labour. Kings and priests didn't build civilizations. Workers did. Slaves did. The exploited did. And all that fine Enlightenment reason, that's just ideology, just wispy smoke. Marx takes philosophy off the shelf and throws it into the streets. The point isn't to interpret the world, he says. The point is to change it. His mirror doesn't flatter kings or bourgeois gentlemen. It reflects factories choking with coal dust, children crawling under machines, workers ground down into meat for profit. And behind that reflection, he shows the hidden pattern, the system itself. Capitalism, the engine of exploitation pretending to be progress. Where Hegel saw destiny, Marx saw a scam. Where Enlightenment thinkers saw freedom, he saw wage slavery. His mirror is brutal, unsentimental, and revolutionary. And it terrified power because it revealed too much, that the cage of reason was just a factory floor, that the Enlightenment's freedom was really the freedom to starve if you couldn't sell your labour, that progress was built on the bones of others. But philosophy doesn't just march in one direction. While Marx sharpens his weapon, Nietzsche dances in the ruins. He declares God dead, not with triumph, but with dread. The old mirrors are shattered, but what's left? Without God, without reason, without universal morality, the world is bare, raw, meaningless. And Nietzsche says, good. He picks up the shards and tells us to cut ourselves free. All those systems, Christianity, morality, even truth itself, were just power plays, useful fictions. Prison walls painted to look like mirrors, so fucking smash them. Nietzsche doesn't hand you freedom neatly wrapped in rights or revolutions. He throws you into the void and says, create. Become your own god. Become the Übermensch, the overman who makes values instead of swallowing them. His mirror doesn't reflect what is. It dares you to invent what could be. Power isn't something to resist. It's something to seize, to embody, to sculpt into art. And then there's Kierkegaard, the anxious Dane, watching the same collapse but panicking instead of celebrating. For him, the Enlightenment's rational cage isn't strong enough to hold meaning, and without God, despair oozes through the cracks. Faith for Kierkegaard isn't obedience to priests or doctrines. It's a leap into the absurd, a desperate gamble against the emptiness. Where Nietzsche laughs at the void, Kierkegaard trembles before it. Different mirrors, same shattering reflection. Certainty is dead. All through the 19th century, philosophy stops flattering power and starts tearing at it. Revolutions ignite across Europe, workers riot, nations rise, empires crumble, and philosophy becomes a battlefield. Hegel giving rulers a script to justify themselves, Marx giving workers a hammer to smash the system, Nietzsche and Kierkegaard whispering that even rebellion isn't enough, you have to face the abyss itself. This is resistance, but it's also dangerous, because every smashed mirror leaves shards sharp enough to wound. Marx's mirror inspires revolutions, but also gulags and dictatorships. Nietzsche's mirror is twisted by fascists into justifying brutality. Kierkegaard's mirror reflects faith, but also paralyzes with dread. Philosophy doesn't escape power. It never does. Even in resistance, it becomes fuel for new regimes, new hierarchies, and new prisons. Still, the 19th century is the turning point. The Enlightenment built a cage for reason, but the 19th century smashed the bars and forced everyone to look at the rubble. Power was no longer eternal, no longer sacred. It was historical, fragile, contestable. And philosophy, for the first time in centuries, wasn't just polishing the mirror, it was throwing it at the wall to see what would happen. Hegel shows us the drama of history. Marx shows us the machinery of exploitation. Nietzsche shows us the emptiness behind morality, and Kierkegaard shows us the terror of freedom. Together, they drag philosophy out of the palace and into the mud. The mirror doesn't flatter anymore. It provokes. It dares you to see what power really looks like when the light comes on. And as the century closes, the world stands on the edge of something darker. The Industrial Revolution belches smoke. Colonialism stretches its claws. Revolutions flicker and fail. Power grows more invisible, more systematic, more total. And in the 20th century, philosophy will stare into that abyss again. Not with optimism, not with dialectics, but with dread. The palace is rubble. The guillotine is rusty. The mirror is shattered. And philosophy walks into the 20th century carrying a handful of jagged shards, ready to cut or be cut. The 20th century doesn't open with a clean page. It opens with smoke. Factories vomiting soot into the sky, railroads cutting the land into veins, armies of men in uniform drilling for wars they haven't named yet. The world isn't ruled by kings anymore, it's ruled by systems. Bureaucracies, corporations, nations with flags, economies that churn day and night. And when power becomes invisible, philosophy shifts again. The mirror no longer reflects emperors on thrones or priests at altars. Now it reflects machines, networks, prisons, invisible cages dressed up as freedom. You can't talk about this era without dragging Michel Foucault into the room. He's like the man who walks through the carnival funhouse, tapping each mirror with a hammer to show you the cracks. He says power isn't something one person has. It's everywhere. It's in the schools, the hospitals, the barracks, the asylums. Power doesn't just punish you. It shapes you. It teaches you how to sit, how to speak, how to desire. You think you're free because the chains aren't visible, but that's the trick. The cage is inside you now. His favourite metaphor is the panopticon, a prison designed so that a single guard in a tower can watch every prisoner, but the prisoners never know when they're being watched, so they start to watch themselves. They self-police. They become their own guards. That's modern power. Not the whip, but the gaze. Not the executioner's axe, but the knowledge that you could be seen at any moment. The mirror of philosophy reflects your own face back at you, terrified, obedient, convinced that surveillance is safety. But Foucault isn't alone. The existentialists, Sartre and Camus, are standing in the rubble of 2 world wars, staring into craters where whole cities used to be. They say the old mirrors are gone. God is gone, truth is gone. All that's left is existence itself. naked, absurd, and meaningless. Sartre insists you're condemned to be free, chained not by systems but by your own choices. Camus says the world is absurd and the only rebellion is to live anyway, to imagine Sisyphus happy as he pushes his boulder. These are philosophies of survival in an age where power looks unstoppable. After Stalin's gulags and Hitler's camps, the mirror of reason is shattered beyond repair. The Enlightenment promised progress, but progress built gas chambers and atom bombs. The reflection is monstrous. Philosophy turns inward, desperate to salvage meaning from a landscape littered with corpses. Then postmodernism takes the stage. Derrida, Lyotard, Baudrillard. They don't just question power, they question whether truth itself exists outside of power. Knowledge becomes a language game, a construction, a story we tell. Baudrillard says we're drowning in simulacra, signs without meaning, reality replaced by images of reality. Disneyland, TV commercials, propaganda, all mirrors reflecting mirrors, until the real disappears behind the reflection. Power doesn't just control your body now, it controls your perception of reality itself. At this stage, philosophy seeps into culture, politics, technology. Foucault's panopticon, it's the internet decades before it existed. It's CCTV cameras on every corner, it's GPS in your pocket recording every step. The panopticon isn't a prison anymore, it's your smartphone. You don't need a guard in the tower. The algorithms watch you, the notifications train you. You scroll because you're addicted, but also because you're being conditioned. The reflection of power isn't a king's portrait. It's your own reflection on a black glass screen, illuminated by endless data feeds. And power loves that you think you're free, that you call it choice when you hand over your privacy, your attention, your time. Facebook, Google, Amazon, they aren't companies. They're the new sovereigns. Their borders are digital, their armies are algorithms, their weapons are mirrors so perfect you can't tell they're distorted. You think you're seeing yourself, and you're really seeing what they want you to be. Meanwhile, philosophy keeps mutating. Critical theory, feminism, post-colonialism, all pulling at the thread, showing how the mirror reflects only certain faces, certain bodies, and certain histories. Audre Lorde tells you the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Frantz Fanon screams about colonialism's scars on the skin and the psyche. These aren't polite theories, they are weapons, reflection sharp enough to cut the chains. But power adapts. It absorbs resistance, sells it back as identity politics, as corporate slogans. The mirror never breaks for long. By the end of the century, philosophy is fragmented. No single system dominates. The old dream of universal truth is gone. In its place, a cacophony. Every voice insisting power has a different shape, a different reflection. And into that noise, the 21st century arrives, carrying its own monsters, surveillance capitalism, AI, biometric tracking, a world where every click, every glance, every breath is recorded. The mirror is digital now. It doesn't just reflect you, it predicts you, it nudges you, it manufactures your desires before you even feel them. Power has learned a new trick, invisibility. It doesn't need to crush you. Just needs to shape the options you think you have. And what's philosophy doing? Still trying to keep up. Still trying to shine a light on systems that slip through your fingers. Still trying to ask the question Socrates asked in the marketplace. But what is justice? Only now the question comes with push notifications, ads tailored to your insecurities, and governments selling security in exchange for freedom. This is the age of control and surveillance. Not the chains of Augustine, not the reasoned cage of the Enlightenment, not even the revolutionary flames of Marx or Nietzsche. This is softer, subtler, total. And philosophy, if it wants to matter, has to be the crack in the mirror, the glitch in the system, the refusal to believe the reflection. The mirror is everywhere now. In your phone, in your job, in your face as you scroll in the middle of the night. Philosophy's job hasn't changed. To show you who really owns the reflection, to remind you that every system of thought is also a system of power, and to dare you, even now, to smash it. Here's the punchline. Philosophy has never been neutral. It's never been about eternal truths carved into the bedrock of the cosmos. From Socrates in Athens to the algorithm quietly deciding which ad to shove in your face, philosophy has always been a mirror. Not a clean one, not a perfect one. A warped, smudged, cracked mirror. And the reflection you see isn't really you. It's the shape of power at that moment, disguised as truth. Look back. Socrates annoyed his city until they broke his skull with poison. Plato gave rulers a utopia where the smartest men always happened to be in charge. Aristotle sliced humanity into categories to justify who got chains and who got crowns. Rome adopted Stoicism to console its emperors and pacify its slaves. Augustine poisoned the bloodstream of the West with guilt. Aquinas welded God to Aristotle so kings could sleep soundly. The Enlightenment raised the flag of reason but only for the chosen few, while the rest of the world was looted in the name of civilization. Hegel turned history into destiny. Marx shouted that destiny was a lie told by the rich. Nietzsche set fire to truth itself. Foucault revealed that even freedom comes with invisible shackles. The digital age completed the trick. You don't need chains when the prison is inside your mind, when you mistake surveillance for connection, when you scroll your own cage willingly. Every time the mirror changed hands, priests, kings, merchants, philosophers, generals, CEOs, whoever held the mirror controlled the reflection, and every time philosophy dressed it up, gave it language, gave it justification. This is justice, this is freedom, this is reason, this is progress. The mirror said so. And because the mirror is philosophy, we believed it. But the reality is that the reflection never fits. There's always someone outside the frame. The slave who refuses obedience, the peasant who mutters blasphemy, the revolutionary who guillotines kings, the worker who strikes, the colonized who revolt, the philosopher who smashed the glass instead of polishing it. Power holds the mirror, but resistance always lurks in the distortion, in the jagged edge. So who holds the mirror now? Is it the governments building databases of their citizens? The corporations tracking every heartbeat through your smartwatch? The algorithms curating your reality until you forget it's curated? Maybe it's all of them. Maybe the mirror isn't in one hand anymore. It's everywhere, stitched into the fabric of life. You carry it in your pocket, you press it against your face, you whisper to it at night and call it connection. And maybe that's the final trick. In the 21st century, you hold the mirror too. You post your own reflection, filter it, polish it, beg for likes. You become both prisoner and guard, both spectacle and spectator. Power doesn't even need to hold the glass anymore. You cradle it yourself, smiling at the image, mistaking it for freedom. That's the danger, and that's the challenge. Philosophy can keep being the servant of power, polishing mirrors for whoever pays the bills. Or it can remember Socrates, Nietzsche, Marx, Foucault, the ones who cracked the glass, who forced people to see what was really reflected there. The job is to ask, who built this mirror? Who benefits from the reflection? And what happens if I smash it? Because the truth is, every mirror cuts when it breaks, and the only honest philosophy is the one that's willing to bleed. Thank you, you beautiful lot, for joining me on this journey through the Philosopher's Cage this week. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. You can leave your thoughts on our website on Substack, which is at theobservingeye.com. We're also on the dreaded social media, which I think is Instagram, X, and TikTok, all with the same handle, at theobservingeye. And we're on YouTube, which is youtube.com at theobservingeye as well, which is where all of our videos live if you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever audio platform you happen to get this on. I have also got an email address, which you can wax philosophical with me on, or recommend ideas for future episodes. And you can email me at david@theobservingeye.com, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Just want to give a big thank you to the people who have already emailed me, and give them some very interesting ideas and thoughts, and some great feedback on the podcast as well. So thank you very much for those of you who took the time to do that, and yeah, it's really appreciated. I'd love to hear from you and what you're thinking, and how, some of these ideas are settling in. So yeah, massively appreciated. Thank you. That's it from me. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.